The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
I'm your darkest dream. They call me devil. My heart is empty. They call me devil, and you should be afraid.
Well, it is Friday the 13th, and this is Betrayal on Arm Radio from 10 to 11 Eastern Standard Time, and I'm your host, Kasy. And just like what I promised last week, this is about the murder of Tupac Shakur, Biggie Smalls, and the East and West Coast, turf war type of situation. But I'm going to tell you this, is that, I'm about to play with the last interview that Tupac Shakur gave 3 days, you guys, 3 days before he was fatally shot in Las Vegas. So, the MTV Music Awards occurred, and Coolio won in that category that he was in. And so this is a MTV interview 3 days before he was shot and killed. So this is 1996, 3 days before his death. And so this was the reaction to him not winning the award at the MTV Music Awards for that year. And, what he said was, there is no East or West Coast battle. And he said that we need to be better in the media, and that we need to, do things different and lift each other up. I got a lot of respect for that, and right next to him was Snoop Dogg. So Snoop Dogg and Tupac are, sitting down giving this interview, and this is a complete interview. This is his last interview that he gave before he was gunned down and killed. And we're going to go into what happened and everything, but it all stemmed from an East Coast, West Coast beef, supposed beef. Was it perpetrated by the media to gain hype? Not Snoop Dogg, but Puff Daddy, who is P. Diddy, and he went by Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, all that stuff, during the times. And so he did the song I'll Be Missing You based on Sting's song I'll Be Watching You, and performed that with Sting. And I believe that had to do with Biggie Smalls, who had just finished the song, and I actually like this song. And it was I think it was called Biggie, and everything. Y'all, if you don't know by now, I do like some gangster rap. I like old school gangster rap. I like myself some, Tupac. Just that one song. I liked the Biggie Smalls song, just that one song. I do like some Coolio, and I like some, 50 Cent, and, of course, Snoop Dogg, and everything, and some Naughty by Nature. That's just part of the 90s culture that I grew up in, is that that was, our rap music, R&B music, and things like that, the pop stuff it has a good beat, and I like it. So, but I'm not going to be dealing with rappers all over the place, because it's just old school stuff. There might be a few. Well, let me think. I don't know if I like any contemporary rappers right now. I think it's all old school stuff. So, I think the last thing oh my gosh, this is old school. I think the last thing was the Thong song. I don't even remember who sang that. Oh goodness, I don't know. We're talking late 90s there. So, but yeah. So I'm going to discuss this, but here's the interview, his last interview 3 days before he was gunned down in Las Vegas and killed. So enjoy.
That's good. You cool? No, I'm straight. I can share with dogs.
I'm straight. That's Mountain Dew. That shit nasty to the motherfucker. You like do no bungee jump?
I just wanted to clear my throat.
You lost Best Rap Video. You'd all disappointed about that?
Oh, no, I didn't lose, see, because I sold 6.5 million copies, so
He
I
won.
won.
When all these famous people get together, what's the one thing you take away? Is everybody much shorter than you thought? I know a lot of people find Snoop and say, 6'4", I had no idea.
Oh, yeah.
But do people seem shorter? There's a lot of attitude going on. What's the one thing you take away?
Oh, it's a lot of attitude, of course, because nobody thought we would show up here. But, we always feel like we keeping it real. Scratch that. We always felt like we're being true to everything we've always stayed representing. And our audience is worldwide. We're not even on we coming out here and it's some East Coast, West Coast. We got beef with the people we got beef with. But we could go anywhere in the country because we are America's most wanted.
Exactly.
So you can't stop the flow.
Can't stop what America wants.
right.
On that note, I know that Biggie and Puffy are here tonight. Did you see them? Do you have anything to say to them at all?
Nah, but if we saw them, we are businessmen. We are not animals. It's not like we're gonna see them and rush them and jump on them. If they see us and they want drama, we're gonna definitely bring it like only Dev Row could bring it. But we here as businessmen to enjoy and
support the
Video Music Awards for MTV because they support us. So if they want to come and use this business opportunity to get on some gangster, we do that better than anybody.
Can you envision a day when, y'all, if not get together and make an album, just peacefully coexist?
There's no dream of making an album with Biggie and Puffy or none of them. We're not sweating it like that.
This is our family
We
over
peacefully
here.
coexist right now
That's
because we all cool. Everybody's here. They sell records. We sell records. Well, I guess you could call that selling records. What they do. We sell large amounts of records, and they sell a few records. And really, it's no competition. People are really making too much out of it than it is. It's really just if you want to talk. We're going to make it specific as to what you can talk about and what you can't talk about. And the East Coast, West Coast thing is something that the journalists and people are making up just to get paid off it so it can drag out. So they're perpetuating it so it could be drama, which I still love MTV. But when it all go down, don't look at me and Biggie and be like, why is there a big East Coast, West Coast war when you're shooting this to 300 homes, 300 countries, telling them about an East Coast, West Coast war that they would never know exists. So that's where information becomes a problem. When
And
MTV
if it did,
News gotta be the ones to let you know.
If it did exist, Pac, we wouldn't be here. So
Right, and if it
let you
exists,
know
how
it's
we gonna be
non-existent.
sitting in New York talking about it? We'll try to be better role models, and y'all try to stop putting that drama out there. You got a lot of power, a lot of responsibility. We both do. We both need to exercise greater restraint.
Okay, so very powerful interview there. That was his last interview. 3 days, he'd be dead. So let's break it down about what occurred. So who was Tupac Shakur? If you guys are not from the 90s, you might not know who this person is. And so I'm going to break this down for you. Tupac Shakur was a highly successful rap artist. He was hip-hop rap artist. He was also an actor. And he was shot September 7th, 1996 in a drive-by shooting in Las Vegas, Nevada. He was 25 years old. And the shooting occurred around 11:15 p.m. Pacific time. And the car carrying Shakur was stopped at a red light at the East Flamingo Road and Colville Lane when this altercation where he was shot. Now what happened is that after the AMAs, the MTV Music Awards occurred, there was this tension and beef. They were at a fight. I believe it was between they were at a fight at the MGM, watching a professional boxing match. Afterwards, in the lobby, there was a fight that took place. There is video of the fight taking place to where it went into the lobby. They were beating up on each other. You see that. And then they leave the lobby, get into the car, and go. And so what happened also is that Suge Knight was in the vehicle with Tupac. I believe Suge Knight was driving the vehicle. And so what happened is that Suge Knight was shot in the head. In fact, he still has the bullet in his head. He was bleeding profusely. And Tupac Shakur was next to him. He got shot as well. And so Suge Knight was driving Tupac to the hospital. And in the interview that Suge Knight gave just 1 week after his friend's death, now Suge Knight was, I believe the head honcho of Death Row Records, which in that day and age was the record. I mean, I believe Tupac, it was Tupac's label, it was Suge Knight's label, it was Snoop Doggy Dogg's label, it was the, West Coast label for rappers. It was the holy grail of rap labels, was Death Row. And Suge Knight in this interview was saying that Tupac and him were sitting there joking, and Tupac's like, you need to go see a doctor more than I do. And then, he was shot on September 7th. He died officially on September 13th. So, there was that time there where he was on intensive care and everything, and then succumbed to his injuries. They believe, I'll get to that in just a moment. The weapon that was used was a .40 caliber Glock 22 pistol, which is kind of the gun choice of gangsters. And, these are gangsters and everything. Rap gangsters. The other one who was, had injuries was Suge Knight, who was driving the vehicle. So they drove jokingly to the hospital. So at the time, he was not shot in a manner that appeared to be fatal. So something happened in the hospital where the injuries became more fatal, because Suge Knight has a bullet in his head. He was shot in the head and survived. Shot in the head and survived. Now, here's the thing. It was a drive-by shooting, and they classify it as an assassination. Somebody wanted this dude dead. Was it because there was a fight and they took it to the streets, and they basically, as Tupac was leaving, decided to, pop him? Or was it an East Coast, West Coast battle? Because there was that huge talk about East Coast, West Coast rivalry, where you had, Puff Daddy on the East Coast, and you had, the West Coast type of thing. So, here are the perpetrators. Now, this is considered an unsolved crime. It's actually, at this point, it's considered a cold case. Because Orlando Anderson is dead. And so they believe the perpetrators are Orlando Anderson and Dwayne Keith Davis that, perpetrated this killing. And so Orlando Anderson his name was Baby Lane Anderson. He died in May 29th, 1998. He was an American gangster and the prime suspect in the murder of Tupac Shakur. Anderson belonged to the California-based gang known as the Southside Compton Crips. Remember the Crips and the Blood? Yeah. So I believe the Crips have the blue bandana and the Bloods have the red bandana. That only makes logical sense because red is the color of blood. So was it a Crips and Blood type of situation? Because that is a California thing. Now, granted, there are probably sects out in other cities, but that was a huge... Pretty much everyone knew about the Crips and the Blood. I mean, that's just... the thing out there. And of course, when you are in a gang, it's kind of like you live by the sword, you die by the sword. You know, that's the only option on there, is that you live and die by the sword. And being in a gang is nothing glamorous, it's nothing cool or anything like that. Now, you do see OGs, which are original gangsters, you know, Snoop Dogg and everything. But when you're living in, and I drove through Compton. I drove through Compton at night, you guys. When I was in California, the GPS kept sending me to get to our hotel, which is in Redondo Beach, kept sending us through Compton. And we drove from Hollywood through Compton at night to get to our hotel. In fact, I went to a Target inside. We drove and we, you know, went to the Burger King, and then there was a Target on the other side of the road. We went inside that Target and we went to that Burger King in Compton, for goodness sakes. We drove through it all over the place. And supposedly when you drive through Compton, it's so dangerous that they constantly have drive-bys. Well, when we were there, we drove through Compton. Now, I'm not going to say it's you know, hasn't changed since I drove through it and everything, but or hasn't, you know, it hasn't gone back up, because you still hear about shootings in that place and everything. And I would not diminish that it might be a dangerous place. We were probably incredibly lucky we didn't get held up or a drive-by or anything like that. Or we were just in a better location of Compton, because Compton is a fairly good sizable community. It's a suburb. So I guess Keith Davis must have confessed, but I believe something happened to him on that one. But yeah. So Tupac Shakur was struck by 4 .40 caliber rounds fired from a Glock, 2 in the chest, 1 in the arm, and 1 in the thigh. And he died from his wounds 6 days later. And Suge Knight was shot in the head and shot in the back. So what occurred before this shooting was that Tupac Shakur was attending a Bruce Sheldon versus Mike Tyson boxing match with Suge Knight and the head of Death Row Records at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. And after leaving the match, one of Suge Knight's associates, Trayvon Trey Lane, a MOB Priya, spotted Orlando Baby Lane Anderson, a Crip gang member from Compton, California, in the MGM Grand lobby. And earlier that year, in May 1996, Anderson and a group of Southside Crips attempted to rob Lane in a Foot Locker store. Oh, I remember this. Yeah, okay. I remember this, the Foot Locker thing. Apparently someone tried to rob a person in a Foot Locker, and Lane told Tupac so I guess Tupac saw Orlando Anderson and attacked him. And Shakur asked him if he was from the Southside Compton Crips and punched him in the face, knocking Anderson to the ground. Tupac and Suge Knight, their entourage, assisted in assaulting Anderson. And this is the fight that was captured on hotel surveillance video. And it was broken up by hotel security. So after this fight took place in the lobby, Tupac went with Suge Knight to Club 662, which, you know, has now been closed, which was owned by Suge Knight. And Shakur and Tupac disclosed to fiance Kida Jones his involvement in the fight in the hotel, previously having promised to return to her after entering the MGM Grand and having her stay in a vehicle. Tupac left with Suge Knight after changing his clothes. So I guess he was trying to maybe get out of the conspicuous clothes. And that's, if you've done something and people are looking for you, you change your clothes. That's what seems like happened. So, but at 11 to 11:05 Pacific time, Suge Knight and Tupac were halted on the Las Vegas Boulevard by officers from the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police. Bike patrol for playing the car stereo too loud and not having a license plate on their vehicle. And the license plates were found in the trunk of Suge Knight's car. And they were released a few minutes later without being cited. And at 11:10, while they were stopped at a red light at the intersection of Flamingo Road and Covell Lane, in front of the Maxim Hotel, a vehicle occupied by two women pulled up on their left side, and Tupac, who was talking through the window of his BMW sedan, exchanged words with the two women and invited them to go to Club 662. So these women were probably very hot and probably very scantily clad. And if you take off your license plate, if somebody's looking for you and you change your clothes and you're playing your music too loud, because that's kind of what people do, you are trying to blend in so you can disappear and get away. So, because they just had a big old fight. And at 11:15, a white four-door late model Cadillac pulls up to Suge Knight's right side. Someone from the back seat rolls down a window and rapidly fires gunshots at Shakur, Tupac Shakur. He was hit 4 times, twice in the chest, once in the arm, and once in the thigh. One bullet went through Shakur's, or Tupac's, right lung, which means he had a collapsed lung at this point and having trouble re-inflating because you have a giant hole in your lung. And as a person who's had a collapsed lung, it's not fun. And Suge Knight was hit in the head by fragments, and he still has pieces of the bullet in his head to this day. The bodyguard, Frank Alexander, stated that when he was about to ride along with Tupac Shakur and Knight's car, Tupac Shakur asked him to drive Jones's car instead, in case they needed additional vehicles from Club 662 back to the hotel. And the bodyguard reported in his own documentary, Before I Wake, that shortly after the assault, one of the convoy cars followed the assailant, but he never heard from the occupants. And Yaki Kadif was riding in the car behind Tupac Shakur with bodyguards at the time of the shooting, and along with a member of the death row entourage, refused to cooperate with officers. So when they were being questioned by the officers. Despite the vehicle having a flat tire and Knight's injury, he was able to drive Tupac Shakur and himself a mile from the site to a Las Vegas Boulevard and Harmon Avenue, where they were pulled over by bike patrol, who alerted paramedics through radio. After arriving on the scene, police and paramedics took Knight and Tupac Shakur to University Medical Center in southern Nevada. They were pulled over just steps away from the MGM Grand Hotel. So maybe they're going back, to do stuff. I don't know. According to an interview with the music video director Gobi Rami, while at the hospital, he received news from the death row marketing employee that the shooter had called the record label and threatened Tupac Shakur. Gobi told the Las Vegas police, but said they claimed to be understaffed. So the police in Las Vegas claimed to be understaffed, like there wasn't enough to do that. No attackers came to the hospital, and Tupac said he was dying while being carried into the emergency room. So between laughing and giggling to where they came to the emergency room. So probably what happened is that the rush of adrenaline and not the massive amount of blood loss, he was probably in that state to where he was lucid. Because here's the thing, if you fall and you hit your head, which killed Miranda Richardson, which is Liam Neeson's wife, or former wife, he's a widower, she was skiing and she hit her head and she was sitting there laughing, and she laughed all night, and then she died because her brain swelled up and she passed. Same thing with Sonny Bono, who hit his head and died from his injuries. And I believe same thing with John Denver happened as well. So probably what happened is that he was in that adrenaline stage, and when he started losing more blood, he started, kind of hallucinating and knowing that he was pretty shot. So it was just not a good situation. So at the hospital, Tupac Shakur was heavily sedated. So he was placed on life support machines and was put in a medically induced coma. A lot of times what they'll do is when you are really hurt, they're hoping that the body can repair itself by putting you in a medically induced coma. And after repeatedly trying to get out of bed, he was, so I guess this does not make any sense. So if he was in a medical induced coma, he's out. So they were saying that he was repeatedly trying to get out of bed. He was visited by Jones and regained consciousness when she played Don McLean's Vincent on the CD player next to his bed. And according to Jones, this is the girlfriend, Tupac Shakur moaned and his eyes were filled with mucus and swollen. And Jones told Tupac Shakur that she loved him. So she knew he was pretty bad off and everything. And so she went into a depression after his death because they really loved each other. And so, and it's unfortunate to be watching someone who you really love going through this, and vice versa. And so Suge Knight was released from the hospital the day following the shooting on September 8th, but did not speak until September 11th. Now, this is way before what actually happened in 2001. He told officers he heard something but saw nothing the night of the shooting. A spokesman for the officers said Knight's statement did nothing to help the investigation. Officers at the time Tupac Shakur's hospitalization reported having no leads, and Sergeant Kevin Manning said during the week that officers did not receive a whole lot of cooperation from Tupac Shakur's entourage. So nobody was really talking and coming forth with information, and so it just hindered this ongoing investigation at the time. So Remy and Shakur's group Outlaws guarded Shakur while he stayed in the hospital due to their fear of whoever shot him, Tupac Shakur, was going to come and finish him off in the hospital. And so basically Tupac Shakur's entourage, his bodyguards and everything, were watching over him, giving him security. And so I guess they brought weapons with them and were guarding him and everything. And so he was in a critical care unit, and on Friday, it was Friday the 13th as well, so it is the anniversary. So on Friday, September 13th, 1996, Tupac Shakur died of respiratory failure that led to cardiac arrest after the removal of his right lung. Doctors supposedly amputated... I'm incorrect. Doctors supposedly attempted to revive him but could not stop the hemorrhaging, and his mother, Alfini, made the decision to cease medical treatment, and he was pronounced dead at 4:03 p.m. Pacific time. So, and that's heartbreaking, having to take someone off of life support. We've had to make that decision before, and it's not easy. So basically, when he was shot in the lung, and his lung failed, and so that caused the respiratory failure, and with all the blood loss he had, it caused his cardiac arrest, and he passed. So in 2014, a police officer who claimed he witnesses Tupac's last moments said that Tupac Shakur refused to state who shot him. When the officer asked Tupac if he saw the person or people who shot him, Tupac responded by saying, F you. He said the full word, but I'm going to say this for media sake. He said the F you to the officer as his last words. So I guess Tupac Shakur's last words on this earth were F you. Paramedics and other officers present at the scene did not report hearing Tupac say those words, nor did Suge Knight or the bodyguard Frank Alexander, who were also present. So perhaps this person was just a fame monger trying to get his 15 minutes of fame. So 1 year after the shooting, Sergeant Kevin Manny, who was head of the investigation, told the Las Vegas Sun investigator Kasy Scott that Tupac Shakur's murder may never be solved. The case was slow in the early investigation. He had few clues, few witnesses coming forward, and so basically he's basically saying that nobody came forward, there's really no clues, and it's really hard to piece together anything. And he does make a reference to we found bin Laden, which was after September 11th. Basically, to this day, it's an unsolved murder, and nobody knows for sure who exactly killed Tupac Shakur, and the people who they suspect did it, one of them is actually dead, and everything. And of course, a short time later, Biggie Smalls, Big Papa, passed on, and he was killed, and that whole thing. Now, is there an East Coast, West Coast rivalry as far as rap music? I think there has always been that whole East Coast versus West Coast, who's better type of thing. And I think that the death of these two individuals only fueled it even further. And I think to this day that there is an East and West Coast beef, because people are still bitter at who killed these two individuals, and these two individuals' murders have still yet to be solved. Will they ever be solved? Probably not at this point. It's probably going to remain a cold case, because the only people who know what happened are not speaking or can't speak. And so, so that is the details of what happened to Tupac Shakur.
Keefe D and his entourage get into a white Cadillac. Along with Keefe D, the driver is a guy named Terrence Brown. They call him Bubble Up. Behind the driver is DeAndre Smith. He's in the left rear passenger seat. And Keefe D's nephew, Orlando Anderson, he's sitting behind the right front passenger seat. All Southside Crips.
One of our little homies said Death Row guys were going to have a concert at the 662 Club. So we went to the 662 Club.
I ran the door at the 662. I seen Orlando and them when they pulled up in the Cadillac. And I told my homies, Southside's up here. My homies that was at 662, everybody had their guns. We knew it was gonna be something. They said about 5 minutes.
Tupac and Shook, they didn't ever show up, so we left.
Keefe D and crew go back towards the strip.
Stopped and got some liquor. We was gonna party and shit. Got our little drinks.
Meanwhile, Tupac and Suge are driving towards the 662 Club. Behind them, there were some girls screaming, Tupac, Tupac.
We came up Harmon, and shit, here he coming at BMW. All the chicks was like, Tupac, Tupac, and he was like, hey, like a celebrity, like he was in the parade. He wouldn't even been out the window, we would have never seen him. My partner busted you. When we pulled up, I was in the front seat. Happened to see my friend, Chuck.
Suge looks over, he sees you.
Yeah.
He looks right at you.
Yeah, he looked at me.
You said the shots came from the back. Big Dre, Orlando. Who shot Tupac?
They keep it for the code of the streets. It just came from the back seat, bro. They keep it for the code of the streets. It just came from the back seat, bro.
So that was Keefe D. Strutter, who said, we're going to keep to the code of the street, and it just came from the back seat. So there was two people in the back seat, Orlando and this other guy, and so Orlando was on one side of the car, probably closest to, and so they believe 100% that Orlando's the one who took, Tupac Shakur's life in a, basically a street fight, a street war on there. Because the code of the street, as far as I understand it from watching movies and whatnot, is that, and I think it's the same for mobs and everything else, is that you keep your mouth shut or you swim with the fishies. Or in this particular case, you get silenced. So, this man is older. He was probably in his 20s there, but he's now my age, so like an old school type person, because everyone from the 90s now is like, we're all in our late 30s, early 40s, or mid 40s now, I guess you could say, and everything. So in 1996, 25 years old, I was, turned 18, 94, so I would have been turning 19. I think I just turned 21. So I think I just turned 21 on that, or I was 20, almost 21 at that time. I was 20 going on 21, because I would have turned 21 in December, so I would have been 20, roughly about 20 years old. So Tupac Shakur was 5 years older than me. So wow, that's crazy. So, and if he was still alive, he would almost be 50 years old now. So these people are in, late 40s, early 50s. So that's kind of wild when you think about it. So this guy, even to this day, goes by the street code. He's just like, I'm not talking. It just, what everyone else has been saying, it came from the back seat of this vehicle. Well, in itself, that is almost like a confession, because who was in the back seat? Were there 3 people in the back seat? There was not 20 people in the back seat. So, it wasn't a clown car. So 2 people in the back seat. But then again, you know, it depends. So you have the driver, you have the back seat driver, you've got the passenger in the rear passenger seat, and then you have the center. So there either could have been 3 people in the back seat there, but they've only identified that there was only 4 people in the car. So one of those 4 people rolled down the window, popped, you know, and, you know, did the fatal shot through Tupac Shakur. But to this day, you guys, and this is a sore spot, and everything, I would say, with people. There are people who it is very much a sore spot. Now, there are speculations that Tupac Shakur is alive. He's living in Malaysia. And they're talking about, you know, the legacy of Death Row Records and his, you know, Suge Knight's son, his legacy, and how he's perpetuating Death Row forward and whatnot. And they're talking about the new version of Death Row and how they're paving their own way and everything. And, you know, I think even Snoop Dogg said that, had something where he said, you know, he's alive and whatnot on there. You know, it's an unfortunate thing. I mean, what would have happened if he didn't pass away? What would his life be like? Would he be superstardom? You know, kind of like the crossover with he's an actor and a rapper. You know, kind of like Ice-T and Ice Cube and things like that. I mean, a lot of people don't know that they're rappers because they only see them on NCIS or CSI or whatever the crap those shows are that they're on. NYPD Blue, I don't know. It's one of those crime shows, and everything. And they only know him from that. So when he started rapping, they're like, "You're a rapper?" Well, he used to be, I mean, he was a very famous rapper. I mean, it was the Ice-T, Ice Cube, Tupac Shakur, Snoop Doggy Dogg, all that kind of stuff. Naughty by Nature. Kind of like that kind of thing. LL Cool J, and everything. But a lot of these millennials who didn't grow up in that culture, they were too young, they weren't even born at that time, which is so crazy to me, is that kids who were born in 2000, they know nothing of the 90s or 80s or anything like that, because it was before they were even born. And doesn't that kind of make you feel a little bit old? Yeah. It's almost like our generation trying to understand the big band generation and the World War II generation, because we weren't even born then, or even trying to understand the 60s. We weren't even born at that time. And we were born in the 70s. I mean, we technically didn't understand that music, but we kind of heard it a little bit. It's like someone trying to understand the 80s and 90s who didn't live it. You can do a spin-off or do your interpretation of it, but unless you lived it, you kind of don't understand it. It's one thing to look at pictures of it and listen to music, but it's a whole thing to experience it firsthand. And so that's something that these kiddos are not going to understand. They're just going to be able to hear the music. And it's so funny because you can look on YouTube and you can see famous bands looking at teenagers listening to their hit songs and their reaction to it. I watched one for the Backstreet Boys and their reaction to the teenagers listening to their music, and that it was funny because they're just like, this teenager is old enough to be my child, you know. And you know, going from a boy band type of situation to where they were super uber famous to where a lot of teenagers are like, I don't even know who you are. It has to be kind of an interesting thing. I mean, even went to the Spice Girls. I mean, huge. How huge were they? And teenagers listening to the Spice Girls are like, okay, yeah, this sounds cool, you know, okay, has a good beat, or that kind of thing. And then they look at the clothes that they were wearing and the video for the song, and judging it, and then having the actual people who performed that song and were in the video listening to this. It's a very surreal experience. And it's just one of those things where I honestly don't think that this case is ever going to be solved. I think in a way people kind of put it to bed because they kind of know who did it, and the person who did it is dead. So, or supposedly did it, he's dead. So it's not like you can bring him out of his grave and say, beat him up. He's already gone. And everything. So, the mystery will continue, and there are cases out there that things are unsolved forever, and they're just a pile of bones in the woods, and those bones turn to dust and, you know, reconstitute itself back into the earth. And it's unfortunate. Some people just don't get justice. Some people do, some people don't. A lot of victims don't get justice. A lot of victims. We've got to kind of change that in this world and everything, because it's a bitter pill. When you don't get justice, it's a bitter pill to swallow. It's a hard lesson to learn and everything. I know people who deserve justice who've never received it and everything. I've seen many documentaries on it, and they deserve justice, but they'll never see it. So, I mean, JonBenet Ramsey, unsolved case. Nobody knows who killed her. They have speculations of who did it, but no definitive answers, no definitive information. Amber Hagerman, the reason why we have the Amber Alert named after her. We've got information. I think it was finally solved, but for years nobody knew what happened to her. Nobody knew where she was and everything. There was psychics on TV shows saying, she was kidnapped and sent to China. She's, in China somewhere. I think her name was something Brown. She was an angel psychic. She talked to angels, and that's what her angels told her. I think it ruined her career, because I think like the week after that, they found the little girl's body in a field in Texas. So it kind of just debunked her like immediately, to where, she's in China somewhere. Nope, she's in a field somewhere and everything. So, yeah, I think a lot of those, I do believe in psychics when they're good, because there have been a couple of psychics that, Kim Zolciak, who's, she's a former Zolciak, she's a Bierman. She has a lady who looks at her palm, and her name is Rose, and she was on camera and telling her, you're going to have a son, you're going to have a daughter, but you haven't had them yet. And she's like, what? I'm not going to have any more kids. Sure enough, boom, boom, boom. She had, all that, everything that Rose said on camera. Boom, it happened. I would love for Rose to read my palm, tell me what's going to happen, because she'd be the one I would believe and everything. The Hollywood psychic that you see on there, that little kid, that teenage kid, I don't really believe him so much. I don't know. I don't believe him. I think it's poppycock. He's like, I don't watch television. I don't know who these people are. I don't believe it for 1 second. You're a teenager. You don't watch TV. You don't listen to music. You don't know pop culture. Come on now. I think you're full of bologna and cheese with that. I think that's bologna and cheese. A teenager who doesn't look at any newspapers or listen to the radio or read a magazine or any of that stuff. Come on now. What do? Sit underneath a rock? I don't think so. Yeah. I don't believe that. He might not know every single celebrity out in Hollywood, but he's come across their pictures and whatnot. he might not know he's going to their particular house, but I guarantee when he sees them, there's some sort of recollection in there. Because a lot of these people, I mean, they are like all over magazines. They're in TV shows, previous TV shows. I mean, all kinds of plays that, that generation watch. There are millennials who watch the Golden Girls. There's a huge surgence of Golden Girl fever. They love the Golden Girls. Heck, I remember when the Golden Girls were on TV, and it was, the first run. Because I watched the Golden Girls, when it was first run on the air and everything. We loved the Golden Girls. We loved Betty White. We still love Betty White. Don't die, Betty White. Live forever. So, we love her because she loves dogs. We like all that kind of thing. So, I don't know. It was very interesting about learning about Tupac, Shakur, and everything. But I am going to end this show with a little bit of California Love, because I like that song. Just a little bit of it, not the whole song, and everything. But if you have any questions or comments or show tip ideas, let me know. Don't forget to continue to show your support for those books on Amazon. The Devil's Business, Tumbleweed, Pandora's Box, Toxic, all those kind of things. Those books on there and everything. And, show support for these other shows and everything. Show your support listening to us. You can show your support financially. We like to see some green. It helps us keep everything, going and buying new equipment and things like that. Show your support by, retweeting, listening, commenting, all that kind of stuff. Any way that you can, to show your support of this station, this show. If you have a beef about this show, send it to Twitter. I see everything on Twitter. It comes to my phone. So, at Simply Kasy is my Twitter handle. Simply Kasy, Kasy. And I'll see it. You'll see a picture of me on there. You'll be like, oh, okay. And I look at Twitter all the time. And if I see you guys retweeting the show, I go into your page and I retweet a bunch of your stuff. And if you, like or subscribe to me, I subscribe to you. Same thing on YouTube. I subscribe back. It's just good policy to do that. If someone takes the time to subscribe to you, you got to take the time to subscribe back. If they take the time to like and comment and all this other stuff, return the favor. If they write you a good book review and they've got a book, do a good book review about them. It's all, show the love. If you hated the book and you're like, this is the biggest piece of crap on the block, just don't put a review. Just keep it to yourself, because that's someone's, that's how they make their money. That's how they do things. And I guarantee when they're not getting those reviews, it still hurts them just as much as if you say, hey, this book's a piece of crap, but send positivity out there. Say, this is a great book, let someone else decide if it's a piece of crap or not. You might not like it, but somebody else might like it. So don't dog on their parade because you didn't like it. Just keep it to yourself. But I would say send positive comments to anything you do. If you don't like someone's YouTube video, don't say, oh my gosh, this is terrible or something like that. Just don't say anything. Just don't watch any more videos from that. They'll get the picture. Maybe they're just trying to learn. Maybe they're trying to get better, I'm always trying to get better. I mean, when I first did my first show, I was so I'm always nervous about doing these shows. I'm like, oh my gosh, I hope this is good. And I do my very best in these shows. And I try to make it entertaining on my shows and in my books. I do the research. I take time to make a good cover and all that stuff. I'm meticulous because I think of myself, I'm like, if I'm looking at this book or if I'm listening to the show, what would I enjoy? What would I want out of it? And I try to put music and sound effects and all this kind of stuff. And I take all that time and energy and effort to do that so that it's an enjoyable experience for you guys. And when I get positive feedback, that just makes me want to do even better and raise the bar and do even better things. because I'm like, wow, there are people who are listening. There are people looking at my books. There are people who are buying my books, listening to when I get the audiobook out, looking at the YouTube pages. I'm like, wow, that's awesome. And when I find out you guys are from other countries, holy moly, so that's like a cherry on top. I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to learn about your country. I want to learn about this. And it's all reciprocating, because in this world right now, we've got a lot. There are so many critics out there. There's so many, downers and putting you down. We need to start lifting ourselves up. Just like what Tupac Shakur said. He said, we've got a responsibility to be better, to do better. I wish he would have followed his advice, because 3 days later, he didn't do better. He had a fight in the lobby that cost him his life. If he wouldn't have had that fight, would he still be around today? He got a little hot-headed. He's 25 years old. He got hot-headed, and it cost him his life. And that's unfortunate, because the Tupac Shakur was around the same time as Selena's death. And at the same, Selena, I think, was 25 years old too. She was in the spring, he was in the fall. And then the next following year, in 1997, Princess Diana died. What is his name? Versace is killed. Diana is killed. And everything. We just have that perpetuating waiting of just, we're not learning from those past mistakes and those past violences. We got to stop that. We're going to end up terminating our whole entire existence by being so wrapped up in that kind of nonsense. But anyway, that's it for the show for today. I'm Kasy, and I'll see you next week, and be safe out there and make good choices. Bye-bye now.